AITA for refusing to lend my friend a significant amount of money because I know she'll use it for a bad reason. I, 29F, have a close friend, Kelly, 28F, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. She's always been the type of person to make quick decisions, act impulsively, and sometimes not think things through. When we met, I appreciated her carefree attitude. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She lived in the moment and always had a fun idea in mind for us to do. But over time, I've seen her get into some pretty reckless situations that have me concerned. And now, I feel like I'm in a difficult position regarding a recent request she made, and I'm starting to feel guilty about my response. A couple of weeks ago, Kelly reached out to me out of the blue, asking if I could lend her a significant amount of money. The amount she requested was $5,000. To give you some context, I've always been relatively financially responsible. I have a steady job, I live within my means, and I've been saving for a while now. The money I've saved is for my future, whether it's for emergencies, investments, or just to secure my financial freedom down the line. I don't live extravagantly, but I'm comfortable. Kelly, on the other hand, has had some financial difficulties in the past. She's bounced between jobs, had trouble with credit, and has made some poor decisions when it comes to managing her finances. She's asked to borrow money from me before, but I've always been cautious about lending her anything substantial, mostly because I've seen how she handles money. I didn't want to be in a situation where I felt taken advantage of or where I could end up in a financial bind myself. When Kelly first asked for the loan, I was taken aback. We hadn't really talked much in recent months, and we hadn't been close enough for me to feel comfortable lending her that kind of money. But I thought maybe it was for something important, so I asked her what it was for. Kelly told me that she wanted to use the money to take a trip. She said she found a last-minute deal to go to Europe with some friends and that it was an opportunity of a lifetime. When I asked more details, she said the trip would be a life-changing experience, and she just had to go. She assured me she would pay me back in a few months once she returned, and that she was certain she could make the money back quickly. At first, I was skeptical. I didn't know much about her travel plans, and it just felt off. But I tried to be understanding and asked her how she was planning to repay me. She said she had some side gigs lined up and could easily cover the cost of the trip once she got back. I still wasn't convinced, so I asked her what would happen if she couldn't pay me back. She said she'd just figure it out and that I didn't need to worry about it. Her confidence in the whole situation only made me more uncomfortable. I told her I would need to think about it, and over the next few days, I tried to process everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't feel right lending her that much money for a vacation, especially when she had a history of being irresponsible with finances. Kelly's request just felt like a typical impulsive decision, and I didn't want to enable that behavior by giving her the funds. I eventually called her and explained that I couldn't lend her the money. I told her I valued our friendship, but I didn't feel comfortable with her plans, and I didn't think it was a responsible decision. I also mentioned that I was worried about her ability to pay me back and that I didn't want to risk losing the money. Kelly was really upset by my response. She said she felt betrayed and that I was being selfish. She told me that I had enough money to lend, so I shouldn't be acting like I was doing her a favor. She accused me of not trusting her and said that if I really cared about her, I would support her dreams, even if it meant lending her the money. She said I was being judgmental and that she had always been there for me when I needed her, so I should return the favor. I was taken aback by how hurt she sounded, but I still felt strongly about my decision. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not trusting her, but about being realistic. I didn't want to put myself in a position where I could lose that amount of money, especially since I knew she wasn't in the best financial situation. It wasn't about not caring for her. It was about being responsible. Since then, things have been awkward between us. Kelly has been distant and hasn't really reached out to me, and when we do talk, it's a little tense. I've started to feel guilty, though, because I know she's hurting. I keep second-guessing whether I did the right thing. Did I overstep by not supporting her when she asked for help? Was I too harsh in refusing her request? I don't want to lose my friend over this, but at the same time, I don't think I could have given her the money knowing what I know. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend $5,000 for a trip, I think, is a bad idea. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for not letting my sister-in-law stay with me after she accused me of being selfish and petty. I, 29F, have a pretty close-knit family, but lately things have been tense, especially between me and my sister-in-law, Kara, 32F. I've known Kara for about 7 years since I started dating my now husband, Ethan, 30M. For the most part, we've had a decent relationship, although it's always been a little strained. Kara has a way of making everything about her, and while I've tried to be understanding, it's honestly exhausting sometimes. A few months ago, Kara started going through a rough patch in her life. She had been living with her boyfriend for the past 2 years, but they broke up and she was understandably devastated. She called me up one evening, crying, and asked if she could stay with me for a little while until she got back on her feet. Ethan and I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and while it's not cramped, it's also not spacious. I agreed, but only after talking to Ethan, and he was on board, though he wasn't thrilled about it. Still, he wanted to help her, so we agreed she could stay for a week or 2 while she figured things out. The first few days weren't so bad. Kara was obviously upset, but she was polite, respectful, and mostly kept to herself. I tried to be supportive, checking in with her, offering her some comfort, and being as helpful as I could be. However, it quickly became clear that Kara wasn't planning on leaving after just 2 weeks. She started making little comments about how the apartment was so cozy and how she loved how quiet it was. She seemed to enjoy the break from her usual environment and started making herself more and more at home. She'd leave her stuff around the apartment, take up space in the bathroom for long periods, and even rearrange things without asking. I kept my mouth shut at first because I didn't want to make her feel worse, but it was starting to get to me. About 3 weeks in, I had a talk with Ethan. I told him that Kara had overstayed her welcome and that I felt like we needed some boundaries. Ethan agreed with me, but also didn't want to confront her directly. He suggested I bring it up with her since I had a closer relationship with her, and maybe that would help her understand. I didn't want to sound mean, but I knew if we didn't address it, things would just keep dragging on. So, I sat Kara down one night and calmly told her that I thought it was time for her to start looking for her own place again. I explained that while we were happy to have helped her out initially, it was getting a little difficult with the space situation. I told her that we loved having her, but that it was important for everyone to have their own space, especially after she had been with us for almost a month. I tried to make it clear that this wasn't personal, but it was just getting too crowded. Kara was not happy with this. She immediately started getting defensive and said that I was being selfish and petty. She accused me of not understanding what she was going through and said that she was still grieving her breakup. She said I was trying to push her out when she needed support the most. She claimed that I was only thinking about myself and that I was being cold towards her when she was already struggling. Honestly, it stung a little because I really thought I had been kind to her, but I also knew I couldn't let her stay forever. The argument escalated from there. Kara started making passive-aggressive comments like, "I guess I'm just a burden to everyone, huh? And must be nice to have your own space." I tried to stay calm and explained that we had been more than accommodating, but it wasn't fair to expect us to keep housing her indefinitely. She then accused me of not being there for her when she needed me the most and said that I only cared about my own comfort. I tried to reason with her, but she kept crying and saying that I didn't understand how hard it was to lose a relationship and be alone. At that point, I was getting frustrated because I felt like no matter how many times I tried to explain myself, she was only hearing what she wanted to hear. After that conversation, things were tense. Kara didn't speak to me for a few days. She barely left her room, only coming out to grab food or use the bathroom. She was acting like a passive-aggressive ghost in the house, and it made me feel uncomfortable. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Ethan didn't seem to know how to handle it either. He wanted to stay neutral, which left me in the awkward position of being the one to deal with Kara's emotions. I tried to give her space, but she was still not making any effort to leave. About a week later, I had enough. I told Ethan that I was not comfortable continuing to live like this, and that I needed Kara to either start looking for a new place or for us to set a hard deadline for her departure. Ethan agreed, and we decided that we'd give Kara one more week. I let her know that we had made a decision, and she didn't take it well. She completely lost it, accusing me of being cruel and inconsiderate. She said I didn't have the right to put a deadline on her recovery and that I wasn't being a good sister-in-law. After that, she left, but she hasn't really spoken to me since. Ethan and I have tried reaching out to her, but she's been distant, and I know she's still upset. Now, I'm starting to second-guess whether I handled the situation correctly. I feel like I was too firm with her, especially given everything she was going through. But at the same time, I don't think I should have to sacrifice my own comfort indefinitely. I'm caught in this weird spot where I feel like I was justified in asking her to leave, but I also feel guilty for not being more patient. So, AITA for telling my sister-in-law that she needed to leave after staying with us for almost a month? AITA for refusing to help my brother with his kids, because I don't want to be a free babysitter? I, 32F, have a younger brother, Tom, 28M, who is married to his wife, Laura, 30F. They have 3 kids, Ethan, 6, Olivia, 4, and Ben, 2. I love my niece and nephews, but lately I've been feeling a little resentful of how often I'm asked to help out with them. It's reached a point where I'm starting to feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong for not wanting to step in as often as they expect me to. Let me give you some background. I've always been close with my brother, and I genuinely care about his kids. When they were babies, I used to help out a lot. Maybe a little too much, but I didn't mind because I understood that being a new parent is overwhelming. I've always been the type of person who's willing to lend a hand, and I knew they needed support. The issue started when Tom and Laura began regularly asking me to babysit. At first, it was just an occasional favor here and there, maybe once a month or so, but over time, it turned into almost every weekend. Initially, I didn't mind because I figured they needed a break, and I was happy to help. But after a while, it started to feel less like a favor and more like an expectation. I work full-time as a marketing manager, and while I enjoy my job, it's not always easy. I have a demanding workload, and I don't exactly have a ton of free time to just be available for babysitting whenever they need me. My social life has taken a back seat, and I find myself exhausted most weekends after watching their kids. What really bothers me is that I'm not asked. I'm told. It's not, hey, do you mind watching the kids for a few hours? It's more like, we need you to watch the kids this Saturday so we can go out for a date night. No discussion, just an assumption that I'll say yes. One weekend, I finally decided to be upfront with Tom. I told him that I loved spending time with my niece and nephews, but I couldn't keep babysitting every weekend. I explained that I needed to reclaim some of my personal time and that I didn't want to burn out. Tom was quiet for a moment, and then he said, I get it, but you're the only one we trust to watch them. We really need your help. I get that they might feel that way, but the more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. I'm not their primary caretaker, and I shouldn't have to step in every time they need a break. It started to feel like they were using me as a free, on-call babysitter instead of working out a more balanced plan. They have friends and family nearby, other people who could help, but they always default to me. The tipping point came a few weeks ago when Tom called me late on a Friday night. He asked if I could come over the next morning to babysit while he and Laura attended a wedding. I had plans that day, and I told him I couldn't do it. Tom was surprised and a bit disappointed, and that's when he said something that really bothered me. You've always helped us out before. We're just asking for one day, and it's not like you're doing anything important. The not like you're doing anything important comment really rubbed me the wrong way. It felt dismissive of my time and personal life, as if my needs didn't matter compared to theirs. I snapped and told him that I had things I wanted to do and that I couldn't just drop everything whenever they needed me. I also told him that he and Laura needed to figure out a more reliable childcare plan and stop relying on me so much. Tom got defensive and said I was being unreasonable and that they didn't have anyone else to turn to. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to abandon them, but that I couldn't keep doing this on my own. The conversation ended with him being upset and saying he'd take it from here. Since then, things have been awkward between us. I've gotten texts from Laura asking if I can watch the kids again, but I've ignored most of them. Tom hasn't reached out much, and when we do talk, it's a little strained. I can tell that he's frustrated with me, but at the same time, I feel like I've done my part. I'm not their backup plan for whenever they want to go out or need a break. A few days ago, my mom reached out to me and said that Tom and Laura were upset with me for not helping. She said that I needed to be more understanding because they don't have a lot of support and that I should step up for my brother. She said that being a parent is hard and that I shouldn't be so quick to say no. I told her that I get that being a parent is hard, but that it's not my responsibility to sacrifice my own life to make theirs easier. Mom didn't take that well and told me that I was being selfish. Now I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too harsh. I feel like I've been more than accommodating in the past, but maybe I should do more to help them out. However, I can't shake the feeling that they're just using me to fill in their gaps, and I don't want to feel like I'm being taken advantage of anymore. I know they have a lot on their plate, but I also have a life, and I don't think I should have to give up my personal time whenever they need me. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother with his kids, because I don't want to be a free babysitter. AITA for refusing to lend my brother money after he blew all his savings. I, 27F, have always been really close with my family, but recently, things have been tense. My brother Mark, 32M, and I used to be inseparable growing up. We shared everything from toys to secrets, and I always thought we would be there for each other no matter what. I'm an accountant, so I've always been good about managing my money. I've had some struggles here and there, but I've always been able to bounce back. Mark, on the other hand, has never been very good with money. He's always had a tendency to live beyond his means, and it's caused problems before, but it's never been this bad. A few months ago, Mark called me out of the blue and told me that he had lost his job. I wasn't surprised. He'd been working for a small tech startup for a couple of years, and I knew that the company had been struggling. Still, I could tell that he was really stressed. He said that he had a little bit of savings, but he wasn't sure how long it would last. I reassured him that he would be fine and that he could stay with me for a little while if he needed to. He ended up moving into my apartment a week later. At first, it wasn't so bad. He wasn't working, but he kept himself busy by applying for jobs and trying to figure things out. I tried to be supportive, offering him advice, and just giving him the space he needed to sort everything out. But then, about a month into his stay, things started to take a weird turn. Mark started spending money on random things. It was small stuff at first, eating out every day, buying new clothes, ordering expensive gadgets online. I try not to say anything, but it started to get really concerning when I saw him using a credit card to pay for things. He told me he had been approved for a credit card with a higher limit while still unemployed, which didn't seem right to me. I mentioned that he needed to be careful with his spending, especially since he didn't have a steady income, but he just brushed it off. It got worse over the next few weeks. He was constantly asking me for money to help cover his living expenses. He said he was looking for jobs, but every time I asked about it, he seemed to be avoiding the conversation. I thought maybe he just needed some time to adjust, but then I started noticing even more concerning behavior. He would buy things he didn't need, like a new gaming console, expensive video games, and even a new phone, all while still asking me for money. At that point, I had to step in. I told him that I couldn't keep giving him money. I had my own bills to pay, and while I wanted to help, I couldn't keep supporting him like this. I explained that he needed to be more responsible with his spending, and that if he was truly looking for work, he should be cutting back on unnecessary expenses. He got defensive, saying I didn't understand the pressure he was under, and that buying these things was his way of coping with the stress of being unemployed. I tried to be understanding, but at the same time, I was really frustrated. It didn't seem like he was trying to get his life together, but rather that he was using his unemployment as an excuse to live irresponsibly. A few weeks later, Mark asked me for a large sum of money. He said he needed it to cover rent for an apartment he was looking at moving into. He had found a place and just needed the funds to secure the lease. He promised that once he got a job, he'd pay me back. I was shocked. It wasn't just a small amount either. He was asking for $3,000. I told him no. I explained that I couldn't afford to give him that kind of money, especially when I didn't see him making any real effort to get back on his feet. I told him that if he really wanted to get his life together, he needed to make some tough decisions, including cutting back on his spending and being more responsible. Mark got really upset. He accused me of being selfish and said that I was his sister and it was my job to help him. He said that I was just being judgmental and didn't understand the struggles he was going through. He claimed that if the roles were reversed, I would expect him to help me without question. I told him that yes, I would expect him to help me if I needed it, but I wouldn't expect him to just keep giving me money without any effort to improve my situation. The tension between us grew. Mark started staying in his room more, barely speaking to me. I could tell he was angry, but I didn't know how to fix it. I felt like I had done what I could, but I couldn't continue enabling his behavior. He had to take responsibility for his own life. I tried to have a conversation with him about it, but every time I brought it up, he just shut down or became more defensive. Eventually, he moved out of my apartment, but things have been awkward between us ever since. Now, my parents have gotten involved. They've both told me that I should have helped Mark more and that I'm being too harsh on him. They argue that family is supposed to support each other, especially when someone is going through a tough time. They say that I should have just lent him the money and that he would have paid me back once he got a job. I feel torn because I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, I just don't think I did anything wrong. I was trying to be responsible with my own finances, and I didn't want to enable his reckless behavior. I feel like I made the right decision, but now I'm questioning myself. I'm not sure if I should have done more, or if I was too harsh in telling him no. So, AITA for refusing to lend my brother money after he blew all his savings? AITA for calling my friend a terrible person after she made fun of my depression? I, 27F, have a friend, Sarah, 28F, who I've known for about 5 years. We met in college, and we've had a pretty solid friendship for most of that time. Over the years, though, I've noticed some changes in her behavior. She's always been a bit of a tell-it-like-it-is type of person, which I appreciated at first, but recently, I've started to feel like she's crossing lines with her comments, especially about sensitive topics. For some context, I've struggled with depression for a few years. It started in college, but it got much worse during the past year, partly because of the stress from work and some personal family issues. I've been in therapy for several months, and while things have gotten better, there are still days when it's hard to manage. I've been open with my close friends about my depression, including Sarah, and I've always tried to be transparent about how I'm feeling. A couple of weeks ago, Sarah and I were hanging out at a coffee shop, catching up after not seeing each other for a few weeks. The conversation turned to mental health, as it often does when I talk with my close friends. I mentioned that I had been feeling down recently, but that I was trying to stay on top of things with my therapy. I wasn't looking for sympathy, just sharing where I was at, because I feel like it's important to be open about mental health. Sarah, however, responded in a way I didn't expect. She started laughing and said, "Oh, come on. You can't still be talking about that depression stuff. You've been going on about this for ages. Maybe it's time to just snap out of it already." I was taken aback. I had shared how much I'd been struggling, and I couldn't believe she would be so dismissive of it. But it got worse. She continued, "You've got a good job, a place to live, friends who care about you. What's the problem? You're literally so lucky compared to so many people. I just don't get why you can't just, I don't know, pull yourself together like everyone else. It's honestly kind of embarrassing how much attention you give to it." I could feel my face flush with embarrassment and frustration. I tried to laugh it off at first because I didn't want to cause a scene, but the more she spoke, the angrier I became. She was saying these things so casually, like my mental health wasn't even a real issue. I tried to explain how hard it had been for me, how it wasn't just about snapping out of it, but she just waved me off and said, "You're just overthinking it. Stop making it a bigger deal than it is." At this point, I felt completely crushed. Not only was she minimizing my struggles, but she was acting like I was being dramatic and seeking attention. I had always been there for Sarah when she had problems, listening to her rants and giving advice, but now I was wondering if she even cared about me at all. I couldn't stay quiet anymore, so I snapped. I told her that she was being a terrible person, that she had no right to belittle my experiences or dismiss something so serious just because she didn't understand it. I told her I was done with her acting like my depression wasn't real, and that if she couldn't be supportive, I didn't want her in my life anymore. I might have said some other things in the heat of the moment, but that was the gist of it. Sarah got really quiet, and I could tell I'd hit a nerve, but she didn't really apologize. She just said, "Fine, whatever, I don't have time for this." We haven't spoken since that day, and I feel a mix of guilt and relief. I'm still upset by her words and how cruel she was, but part of me wonders if I overreacted. I know she can be blunt, and maybe I just took it the wrong way, but I can't get past the fact that she essentially told me to get over something that's been one of the hardest parts of my life. A few of my other friends have reached out to me to ask what happened, but I haven't really told them the full story. Some of them know about my struggles with depression, and they've been supportive, but I don't want to drag everyone else into this. I'm also a little embarrassed by how I reacted. Maybe I should have just kept quiet and handled it more calmly. At the same time, though, I can't shake the feeling that I was justified in standing up for myself. So, AITA for calling my friend a terrible person after she made fun of my depression. AITA for refusing to forgive my sister after she secretly gave away my childhood pet. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Emily, 26F, and we've always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, we fought constantly. I'm the older sibling, and I took on a bit of a caretaker role, especially since our parents were often busy with work. Emily, on the other hand, was always more independent and did her own thing. Even as kids, she often did things that annoyed me, and we never really had a strong bond. When I was 12, I got a dog named Max. He was a golden retriever, and I had wanted a dog for years. Max was my constant companion throughout my teenage years, and he was honestly the one thing that kept me grounded during some tough times in high school. Max was my rock, and I loved him more than anything. He was a big part of my life as I transitioned into adulthood, and I always assumed he would be there for the long haul. A few years ago, Max started to show signs of age. He wasn't as spry as he used to be, and his health began to decline. Around the same time, I moved into a new apartment, and I was living on my own. The place was small, and I was working long hours, so I started to feel guilty about not being able to give Max the attention he deserved. I talked it over with my parents, and we agreed that it might be best if Max moved to my parents' house so that they could look after him in his old age. My parents live in a bigger house with a large yard, and they were happy to have Max. He was still well-loved there, and I felt like he was in a good place. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago. I was visiting my parents for the weekend and decided to stop by and check in on Max. When I got there, I noticed that he wasn't around. I assumed he was outside in the yard, so I went out to look for him. I didn't see him there, so I went inside and asked my mom where he was. My mom looked at me and hesitated for a moment. Then she told me that Max was no longer living there. Confused, I asked her what she meant, and she explained that Emily had taken him without telling me. Apparently, Emily had been staying at my parents' house a lot in the last few months, and she had become very attached to Max. She claimed that he was too old to be at my parents' house and that he needed to live with her instead. I was furious. Emily had never mentioned anything about taking Max, and I had no idea she even wanted him. When I confronted her about it, she told me that Max was better off with her because she had more space and could take care of him better than my parents could. She said it was an easy decision because Max was getting old and she didn't want him to suffer anymore. I told her that she had no right to make that decision without consulting me first and that I had entrusted my parents with his care. Emily got defensive, claiming that I never really took care of him and that she had spent more time with him recently. She said that I didn't have time for him anymore and that he deserved to be somewhere where he would get all the attention. I tried to explain that I had made the best decision I could at the time, but it didn't matter. She was convinced that she was doing the right thing by taking Max. I asked her to bring Max back, but she refused. She said she was already attached to him and didn't want to uproot his life again. She claimed I was overreacting and that I should be grateful that he was with someone who loved him. The situation escalated, and I ended up leaving my parents' house in tears. I haven't spoken to Emily since that day, and I'm honestly not sure how to proceed. What really hurts is that I feel like Emily took advantage of a vulnerable situation. Max was a part of my life for so long, and I feel like Emily just swooped in and took him without even considering how it would make me feel. She didn't even tell me about it beforehand. She made a decision about my pet's life without any regard for my feelings or my role as his primary caregiver. It feels like she didn't care about what I wanted or what was best for Max. She just wanted to keep him for herself. I've had a few conversations with my parents, and they've told me that they're caught in the middle. They love Max, but they don't want to get involved in the conflict between me and Emily. They've said that if I want Max back, it's up to me to talk to Emily about it, but I'm not sure if I even want to. I've always been the responsible one in our family, and I feel like Emily's behavior is just a reminder of how little respect she has for my boundaries. I've thought about cutting contact with Emily for a while because I'm tired of feeling like I can't trust her. But at the same time, I don't want to create more drama in the family. I'm also struggling with the fact that Max is getting older, and I don't know how much longer he has left. The thought of him being with someone else, someone who didn't even consult me before taking him, makes me feel sick. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my sister after she secretly gave away my childhood pet? I feel like she's crossed a line, but I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too dramatic about it. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her job? I, 28F, have a best friend, Emily, 29F, who I've known since high school. We've always been incredibly close, and I consider her family. We've been through so much together, graduating college, navigating relationships, and just being there for each other during the ups and downs of life. I've always tried to be there for her when she needed me, and I thought she'd do the same for me if the roles were reversed. A few months ago, Emily lost her job. It wasn't entirely unexpected. She had been working in marketing for a startup that had been going under for a while, but she was still devastated. She called me crying one evening, saying that she didn't know what to do and that she couldn't afford to pay rent for the next month. She told me that she was looking for a new job, but that things were tough. I felt for her, I really did. We've always been able to talk through our problems, and I wanted to help, so I offered to let her crash at my apartment temporarily until she got back on her feet. I made sure to let her know that I was offering a temporary solution, but that I had a small apartment and it wouldn't be ideal long term. She agreed, and I told her that she could stay for a month or so, just until she found something. At first, things weren't bad. Emily was being helpful around the apartment. She'd cook dinner for us, help clean, and even offer to chip in for groceries, though I told her not to worry about it. She kept herself busy with job hunting and interviews, and I really thought she was taking the situation seriously. However, after a few weeks, I started to notice a shift. Emily's job search didn't seem to be going anywhere. Every time I asked how things were going, she'd either avoid the topic or give me vague answers. She seemed less motivated to look for work, spending her days on the couch watching Netflix or scrolling through social media. Meanwhile, she was still asking me for small amounts of money here and there. She said she needed it for gas or groceries or even just a little extra for rent, but I started getting uncomfortable with how frequently she was asking. I had already told her she could stay for a while, but I hadn't expected to be helping her financially on top of letting her live with me. I tried to bring it up gently one evening, asking her if she had any updates on her job search. She snapped back and said that I was pressuring her and that job hunting takes time. I told her that I wasn't trying to pressure her, but that I thought it was important for her to stay focused and proactive. She then started getting defensive, claiming that I didn't understand how stressful it was. I was frustrated because I felt like she wasn't putting in the effort to make the situation better. At this point, Emily had been living with me for almost 2 months, and things are starting to feel more strained. I work from home, so having her in my space all day, every day was beginning to get on my nerves. She'd sleep in late, leave her stuff everywhere, and eat all the food I'd buy without replacing it. I'm not an overly picky person, but it felt like there was a lack of respect for my space and my routine. One evening, I came home to find the kitchen a mess. There were dirty dishes everywhere, half-eaten food, and crumbs all over the counter. I asked Emily to clean up, but she said she was too tired and would do it the next day. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and I snapped. I told her that it was getting to the point where I couldn't keep accommodating her. I said that I couldn't keep letting her stay indefinitely, and that she needed to either find a job or figure out another place to stay. Emily was livid. She said I was being harsh and unsupportive. She accused me of not understanding how difficult her situation was and that I was being selfish for not wanting to help her out more. I was taken aback by how angry she got. I thought I was being reasonable. I wasn't asking her to find a job overnight, but I needed her to start being more responsible. I wasn't asking her to contribute to the rent or bills, but at the very least, I needed her to clean up after herself and respect my space. She called me judgmental and ungrateful, saying that she didn't have anywhere else to go and that I should be a better friend. It felt like a slap in the face because I've been bending over backward to help her, and it seemed like she wasn't even trying to meet me halfway. The argument escalated from there. I told her that if she wasn't actively trying to make progress, either with finding a job or moving into a new place, I couldn't let her stay any longer. She started packing her things and said she was going to stay with our mutual friend, Sarah. Sarah lives in a bigger apartment, and I knew she'd been offering Emily a place to stay. I felt guilty at first, thinking I was being too harsh, but after some reflection, I realized I wasn't being unreasonable. Now, things are really tense between us. Emily has been texting me, saying that I betrayed her and that I'm not a true friend. She said that I've always been there for her in the past, but now that she needed me, I turned my back on her. I haven't responded to most of her messages because I feel like she's trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty. My other friends have started to pick sides. Some agree with me, saying that I did what I had to do, while others think I was too tough on her and should have given her more time. My parents, especially my mom, have been on Emily's side, saying that I should have been more understanding of her situation and that I could have helped her more. I know that I was trying to set boundaries, and I didn't want to enable her behavior. I wanted to be a good friend, but I felt like I was being taken advantage of. At the same time, I wonder if I was too quick to cut her off when she was in a difficult spot. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend stay with me after she lost her job and started becoming more irresponsible. AITA for refusing to help my friend after she lied to me about needing money for an emergency. I, 29F, have a close friend, Megan, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together over the years, and I've always considered her one of my best friends. I've been there for her during tough times, whether it was supporting her through family issues, helping her move, or just being there to listen when she needed to talk. I've always tried to be a good friend, and I thought our friendship was built on trust and honesty. Recently, Megan reached out to me in a state of panic. She told me that she needed help and that it was an emergency. She said she had gotten into a situation where she was short on rent, and if she didn't pay it by the end of the week, she would be evicted. She told me she had no one else to turn to, and she asked if I could lend her $1,500 to cover her rent. I'll be honest, I wasn't thrilled at the idea of lending that much money, but I've helped her out in the past when she was in financial trouble, and I figured she'd pay me back as she had before. I also thought about the situation for a while. Megan has always been a bit impulsive with her finances. She has a habit of spending money on things she doesn't need, and I tried to talk to her about being more responsible with her budget. But at the same time, I knew she was in a tough spot, and I wanted to be supportive. We've been through a lot together, and I figured this was just one of those times when she needed a little extra help. I agreed to lend her the money. I told her that I wasn't in a great financial situation myself, but I could scrape together the amount she needed. She assured me that she'd pay me back within a month, and she said she would set up a payment plan so it wouldn't be a huge burden on her. I also asked her to give me the details about how much she owed and to provide me with some proof that the money was actually going toward rent. She agreed, and I sent her the money that same day. A few weeks went by, and I hadn't heard from Megan. I followed up with her, asking when I could expect the first payment, and she seemed evasive. She kept making excuses, saying that her job had been really busy and that she was waiting for her paycheck to come through. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I tried to be patient. A couple more weeks went by, and I still hadn't received any money from her. So I texted her again, asking for an update. This time, her response really threw me off. She told me that she had actually used the money for something else. She didn't say what, but she said it was something important. She said she had found a way to cover her rent without my help, but that she was still planning on paying me back. I was furious. Not only had she lied to me about needing the money for rent, but now it seemed like she had used it for something completely unrelated. I asked her what she had spent the money on, and she said she couldn't tell me. She said it was personal and that I shouldn't be upset because she was still planning to pay me back. I felt completely betrayed. I had helped her out in good faith, and now it felt like she had taken advantage of me. I told her I didn't appreciate being lied to, and I felt like she wasn't being honest about her financial situation. She tried to downplay it, saying that she was still going to pay me back and that I was overreacting. I told her that I didn't want to deal with someone who was going to lie to me and take my help for granted, and I demanded that she return the money. That's when things really started to unravel. Megan started blaming me for being too hard on her and said that I was treating her like she didn't care about our friendship. She said that I was acting like she had stolen from me and that I was making her feel guilty for something that wasn't a big deal. She said she didn't understand why I was so upset when she was going to pay me back anyway. She claimed that I was attacking her when all she had done was ask for help, and she tried to turn the situation around by accusing me of being unsupportive. I was furious. I didn't know how to process the fact that she had lied to me about a situation that was supposed to be serious. I told her that I didn't want her to pay me back anymore. I felt like I couldn't trust her, and I didn't want to be friends with someone who would take advantage of me like that. Megan became defensive, and we had a big falling out. She accused me of not being a good friend and said that I was acting like I didn't care about her well-being. She told me that I should have just trusted her and not questioned her. After that, we stopped talking. I haven't heard from her in weeks, and I'm honestly not sure if I even want to repair the relationship. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I keep coming back to the fact that she lied to me, took my money, and didn't even have the decency to be honest about what it was for. It feels like she only cares about herself and is willing to manipulate me when it suits her. I've always been there for her, but now I'm wondering if I was just a convenient resource for her when things were difficult. A few of my other friends have reached out to me, asking what happened. Some of them think I was justified in being upset, while others think I overreacted and should have just accepted that Megan was having a tough time. They've told me that I should try to talk to her and smooth things over, but I honestly don't know if I want to. It feels like she has a pattern of being dishonest and only reaching out when she needs something from me. I'm tired of being taken advantage of, and I don't know if I want to be friends with someone who doesn't respect me. So, AITA for refusing to help my friend after she lied to me about needing money for an emergency. I feel like I did the right thing by standing my ground, but I'm starting to wonder if I overreacted. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for not letting my sister-in-law come to my birthday dinner because she brought her kids. I, 30F, have a pretty close relationship with my in-laws. My husband, Jake, 32M, comes from a big family, and while we don't see them every day, we spend holidays together and generally get along. However, there's one person in the family that I've always had a little trouble with. My sister-in-law, Rachel, 34F. Rachel is a bit of a wild card. She has 3 kids, ages 5, 8, and 10, and while I don't dislike them, they can be a handful. Rachel has always been very protective of her children, and while I respect that, she tends to bring them everywhere, even when it's not really appropriate. I've had a few incidents in the past where Rachel would invite herself and her kids to things that didn't really involve them, like our date nights or even a couple of smaller family get-togethers. It's not that I don't like kids. I do. I just don't feel that every event is the right setting for children, especially when they're really young and can't control their energy or behavior. Rachel would always argue that it's family and that we should just make things work, but it's been a bit frustrating at times. Still, I never made it a huge issue, and I always tried to accommodate. When my birthday was coming up this year, I decided I wanted to keep it low-key. I'm not the type to throw big parties or make a big fuss. I just want a small dinner at a nice restaurant with close friends and immediate family. I made a reservation for a small group, only about 8 people, including Jake, his parents, and a couple of our friends. It was going to be a relaxed night with good food and even better conversation. I sent out invitations, and everyone was on board. However, about a week before my birthday dinner, Rachel called me. She asked if it would be okay for her to bring her kids. I was a little thrown off because, as I mentioned before, I was aiming for a calm, adult evening. The restaurant I'd chosen wasn't really kid-friendly. It was a nice place with a quiet ambience, and it wasn't the sort of spot where you could easily entertain children, especially not young ones. Plus, it was going to be a more intimate gathering, and I felt like having kids there would change the whole dynamic. I explained to Rachel that I really wanted the evening to just be for adults, that the restaurant wasn't ideal for kids, and that I prefer to keep the event child-free. I thought I was being pretty polite, but Rachel wasn't happy. She immediately started getting defensive, saying that I was being unreasonable and that her kids were part of the family. She argued that it wasn't fair to exclude them just because I wanted a grown-up night. I tried to explain that it wasn't about excluding anyone, but rather about the vibe I was going for. I mentioned that it's not uncommon for birthday dinners to be for adults only, but she wasn't hearing it. Rachel then told me that if her kids couldn't come, she wouldn't be able to make it at all. She said she couldn't find anyone to watch them, and she didn't feel comfortable leaving them with a sitter for the night. I was a little frustrated at this point because I knew that she could have arranged something if she really wanted to. I also knew she had a couple of friends who could help her out with babysitting. Still, I didn't want to argue, so I said that I understood, but that I was really hoping for a child-free dinner. I told her that she was still welcome to join, but if she couldn't make it without her kids, I completely understood. Rachel didn't take this well at all. She started saying things like, "It's my family, and I should be able to bring my kids to any family event, and I'm not going to choose between my kids and my sister-in-law." It felt like she was guilt-tripping me, and it made me uncomfortable. I tried to stay calm and reiterated that I was trying to have a quiet night, and that it was nothing personal, but she ended up hanging up on me before I could get another word in. Later that week, I received a group message from Jake's side of the family, including his parents, siblings, and extended family. It was about my birthday dinner and asking if everyone was still on board. When I saw Rachel's message pop up in the group chat, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. She had messaged everyone, saying that she wouldn't be attending the dinner because I was being unreasonable and exclusionary by not allowing her children to come. She told everyone that she couldn't make it without them, and she made it clear that she was hurt by my decision. I was shocked. First of all, I hadn't told anyone else about our conversation, and now she was making me look like the bad guy to the whole family. I felt like she was trying to paint me as someone who was being mean or unfair, even though I tried to be kind and reasonable. It wasn't like I was banning her or her kids from family events forever. I just wanted one night to be child-free. The rest of the family started messaging me, asking if I was sure about my decision and if I'd considered how Rachel might feel. I was a little overwhelmed. I explained to them that I wasn't trying to be malicious and that I loved Rachel's kids, but I had a specific vision for my birthday dinner. I told them I wasn't trying to exclude anyone, but I hoped they would understand that I just wanted one evening that was quieter and focused on the adults. Some of them were supportive, saying that it made sense to have a child-free event now and then, while others expressed that they understood Rachel's feelings, but also felt I was within my rights to make the decision. Jake's parents, however, were a little more upset. They told me that Rachel was upset, and they thought I should reconsider. They said it was important for family to support each other, and they implied that I was being too rigid and not considering how much it would mean to Rachel to have her kids included. In the end, I didn't back down. I kept my dinner as planned, and Rachel did not show up. It was a great night, exactly what I wanted, calm, intimate, and full of good conversation. But I felt some tension with her ever since. She hasn't spoken to me much, and there's been a noticeable distance between us at family gatherings. I know that I'm probably going to have to address this with her eventually, but I'm still feeling conflicted. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law come to my birthday dinner because she brought her kids? AITA for cutting off my best friend after she kept making passive-aggressive comments about my relationship? I, 27F, have a best friend, Katie, 28F, who I've known since high school. We've been inseparable for years, always confiding in each other and sharing everything from personal milestones to our biggest challenges. I've always seen her as a sister, and we've had each other's backs through thick and thin. However, recently, things have become tense between us, and I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong for what I did. A little over 6 months ago, I started dating a guy, Jack, 30M, who I met through work. It was a bit of a slow burn. We were friends for a while before we realized there was chemistry between us. Jack and I get along really well, and our relationship has been healthy and easygoing. He's respectful, supportive, and shares a lot of the same values as me. We both have our lives together, and things have been going great, or at least I thought they were. Katie has always been a bit outspoken, and sometimes she can make jokes that border on rude, but I've never taken them too seriously because I know she doesn't always think things through. I'd say that over the years, I've learned to brush off some of her comments. However, since Jack and I became official, I've noticed a pattern of passive-aggressive remarks that I can no longer ignore. It started small. At first, she'd make little jokes about how Jack was too perfect for me, implying that there must be something wrong with him. She'd say things like, "I can't believe someone as nice as Jack hasn't run away yet," or, "I guess you're lucky you found someone who can put up with you." At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just Katie being her usual sarcastic self. But over time, the comments became more pointed. One evening, we were having dinner at my apartment, and Katie made a comment about how Jack and I seemed to have everything together, but it must be boring because we didn't go out partying or drinking like she did. She said, "Wow, you guys are like an old married couple already. When's the first big argument going to happen?" The way she said it was so dismissive, like she was almost mocking the idea that our relationship was stable. I was taken aback, but didn't say much because I didn't want to make a scene. I just brushed it off and changed the subject, but it stung. As time went on, Katie's comments started to get worse. Every time we hung out, it was like she had something negative to say about Jack. If we were talking about a movie we'd watched together, she'd say something like, "Yeah, I'm sure Jack let you pick the movie since he's too perfect." Or if Jack and I had planned something for the weekend, she'd comment, "I'm sure Jack's schedule revolved around your plans, huh?" She would also act like she was just teasing, but it started to feel like she was genuinely unhappy about my relationship. I started to notice that whenever Jack wasn't around, Katie would suddenly be very critical of him, often asking questions like, "What does Jack even do for fun?" Or, "Doesn't it bother you that Jack never seems to have any drama in his life?" The final straw came a few weeks ago. Jack and I were having a quiet weekend, just relaxing and enjoying each other's company. We went out for brunch, and I posted a photo of us on Instagram. A few hours later, Katie sent me a text saying, "Nice picture, but I don't know how you're managing to stay so calm while he's around. I get bored if I were you." I was so shocked by that comment. I had no idea where it was coming from, and I felt like I'd had enough. I've always been supportive of Katie's relationships, even when I didn't like her boyfriends, so I couldn't understand why she was being so rude about mine. I confronted her. I told her that I'd noticed her passive-aggressive comments and that they were starting to bother me. I asked her if there was something she didn't like about Jack or our relationship, because it felt like she was constantly trying to bring us down. I told her that I valued our friendship, but I didn't appreciate her negativity towards something that was important to me. She responded by saying that I was overreacting and that she was just joking around and didn't mean to make me feel bad. She told me I needed to lighten up and stop being so sensitive. She also accused me of not being able to take a joke anymore, which made me feel like I was the one at fault for standing up for myself. After that conversation, I decided to take some space. I didn't want to be around someone who was actively making me feel bad about my relationship, especially when it was something I was happy and proud of. I told her I needed time to think things through and that I wasn't sure I could keep our friendship as it was. Katie was upset, but didn't seem to understand why I was so hurt by her comments. She said I was being dramatic and too sensitive, but she also mentioned that she didn't want to lose me as a friend. It's been a couple of weeks since that conversation, and I haven't reached out to Katie. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our friendship, and I've realized that the pattern of negative comments has been there for a while. I'm frustrated that she hasn't taken responsibility for her words or apologized, and I'm starting to feel like maybe this friendship isn't as healthy as I once thought. I'm not asking her to love Jack, but I do expect her to respect my relationship and the choices I make. It feels like she's been intentionally undermining me, and I can't keep pretending like it doesn't hurt. I've talked to a few of my other friends about it, and some of them think I'm being too hard on Katie. They say she's just joking around and that I should let it slide. Others agree with me, saying that Katie's behavior has been disrespectful and that I'm right to set boundaries. I feel stuck because I really value Katie's friendship, but I also feel like she's been intentionally hurting me. So, AITA for cutting off my best friend after she kept making passive-aggressive comments about my relationship. I feel like I've tried to talk to her about it, but maybe I'm overreacting. AITA for kicking my brother out after he let my son stay with him for a weekend and then refused to let me pick him up on time. I, 35F, have one child, my son Ethan, who is 9 years old. I'm a single mother, and while life can be tough, I've always tried my best to raise Ethan with love and discipline. We have a small but happy family, and I'm very protective of him, as most mothers are. My brother, Greg, 32M, is someone I've always gotten along with. We've had our ups and downs, but he's always been supportive of me as a sibling. The only issue is that Greg doesn't have kids himself, and quite frankly, he doesn't always seem to get the nuances of parenting. A few weeks ago, I needed a break. I was feeling completely overwhelmed with work and the demands of being a single parent, so I decided to take a weekend to myself. I thought it would be good for both me and Ethan to have a little time apart, so I asked Greg if he could watch him for a couple of days. He agreed, and I was relieved that I could get some time to recharge without worrying about Ethan's well-being. Now, I've always known that Greg doesn't have the same level of patience with kids that I do. He's not mean to them, but he's definitely not great at handling tantrums or even the typical quirks that come with being a kid. Still, I trust him enough to care for Ethan for a couple of days, especially since Greg had stayed with me a few times before when I needed help. I gave Greg all the details about Ethan's routines: when he eats, when he sleeps, his favorite games, what he needs for school, and what he's allergic to. I also made sure that Ethan knew how to contact me if he needed anything. I thought everything was covered. I told Greg I'd pick Ethan up on Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. He assured me that everything would be fine and that I shouldn't worry. So, on Sunday, I was looking forward to picking up Ethan and hearing all about his weekend. I arrived at Greg's place around 3:45 p.m., a little early so I could grab a coffee nearby before heading over. When I got to his apartment, I rang the doorbell, but Greg didn't answer. I thought maybe he was in the bathroom or just hadn't heard me, so I rang again. No response. I texted him, but still nothing. At this point, I started to get a little anxious. I know my brother is sometimes forgetful, but this felt odd. I waited outside for about 15 minutes before texting him again, asking if everything was okay. Finally, after a few more minutes, he responded saying, "Oh, sorry. I got caught up with something. Ethan's fine. Don't worry. Just give me another half hour. I'll bring him down then." I was frustrated. He knew the time I was supposed to pick Ethan up, and I'd made it clear that I was on a tight schedule. I replied, "Greg, this isn't funny. I've been waiting outside for over 30 minutes now. I need to get going. Can you just bring Ethan down?" He didn't respond to that text, and at this point, I was feeling pretty angry. I went upstairs and knocked on his door. He opened it, but I could tell something was off. He looked rushed, and I could hear Ethan inside, talking and laughing with someone. I asked if everything was okay, and Greg said, Yeah, everything's fine. Just a minute, I'm getting his things together." He didn't seem too concerned that I was visibly upset. I could feel my blood pressure rising as I stood there, waiting. A few more minutes passed, and then Greg finally let me in. I walked in and saw Ethan sitting on the couch, still in his pajamas. I immediately noticed that he looked like he hadn't showered, and he was playing video games, something I had specifically told Greg was a no-go on weekends because it messes with Ethan's routine. I asked Ethan how his weekend was, but he seemed nervous, which only made me more concerned. When I asked him why he hadn't taken a shower yet, he said he didn't know and that Uncle Greg said it was fine to wait. At that point, I turned to Greg, and I could feel my anger rising. "Greg, what the hell is going on? You knew I'd be here at 4 p.m. Ethan's supposed to be ready, and why is he still in his pajamas? You told me everything was fine, but this doesn't feel right," I said. Greg tried to laugh it off, saying it's no big deal, relax. I just lost track of time, and Ethan was having fun, but I wasn't having it. I was upset. I'm his mother, and I had made it clear that I wanted everything to be ready when I arrived. To make matters worse, Greg then dropped the bombshell. "Oh, by the way, I made plans for Ethan to stay the night. We're going to the park tomorrow morning. He'll have a blast." I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had specifically told Greg that I was coming to pick Ethan up, and now he was telling me that he had made plans to keep him overnight without asking me first. This wasn't a casual decision. I had made it clear that I wanted my son back today. "Greg, are you serious? You can't just decide that Ethan is staying longer without asking me first. I need him home today. This isn't up for debate," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Greg immediately got defensive and said, "You're overreacting. It's just one more night, and it'll be good for him. He'll be fine. Don't make a big deal out of it." I couldn't believe it. I told him that he was out of line, and I demanded that he pack up Ethan's things so we could leave. Greg got angry, too. He told me I was being controlling and that I didn't trust him. He said I was treating him like a child and that he was perfectly capable of looking after Ethan. But I couldn't get past the fact that he had ignored our agreed-upon schedule and had made plans for my child without even telling me. At this point, I snapped. I told Greg that if he didn't let me take Ethan right then and there, I would leave and not come back. I started to walk out of the apartment when Greg yelled, "Fine, go ahead and take him. You're overreacting. You can't just control everything." I turned back, told him that I didn't need his help if this was how he was going to act, and left with Ethan. I'm still furious about what happened. Ethan was quiet the whole way home, and I could tell he was uncomfortable with the situation. It's been a week, and Greg hasn't apologized or even acknowledged that what he did was wrong. He sent a few texts saying I overreacted and that I'm making drama, but I'm not sure how to move forward. I'm really upset that Greg thought he could make decisions for Ethan without consulting me first, and I don't know if I can trust him to care for him again. So, AITA for kicking my brother out after he let my son stay with him for the weekend and then refused to let me pick him up on time. AITA for refusing to let my brother-in-law bring his girlfriend to my family vacation after their history. I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 36M, for 7 years. We have a pretty tight-knit family, and we usually spend a week together every summer for a vacation. It's a tradition that goes way back, and it's something I look forward to every year. This year, though, I'm feeling really conflicted about whether or not I'm in the wrong for what I did. Mark has a younger brother, Jake, 31M, who is a bit of a troublemaker. Jake has always been the wild card in the family. He's funny and charming, but he has a history of making questionable decisions. He's had a string of short-term relationships, and every time he starts seeing someone new, it feels like it's a huge deal for him. The problem is that he often brings his girlfriend around, and there's always some sort of drama that follows. Whether it's a weird argument with one of our parents or a fallout with another family member, it always feels like Jake's relationships end in some kind of chaotic mess. The issue I'm dealing with right now is that Jake recently started dating a woman named Lauren, 28F, and I really don't like her. To be fair, I don't know her that well, but from the first time I met her, I've had a weird vibe. She's polite, but there's something about her that feels off. She seems to only care about herself and is constantly seeking attention. I'm sure that sounds harsh, but I can't help the feeling that she doesn't really care about getting to know our family. She's never asked any questions about us, and when she does speak, it's mostly about herself and her accomplishments. At first, I kept my opinions to myself because I didn't want to cause any problems, but things took a turn when Jake announced he was bringing Lauren to our family vacation this summer. I was initially hesitant because of how things went with his last girlfriend. She was nice enough, but there was a lot of tension during the trip, and it didn't seem like she really clicked with the family. This time, I was even more concerned because of how Lauren acted at a recent family dinner. I could tell she wasn't that interested in being there, and she spent most of the time scrolling through her phone rather than engaging with anyone. The moment that really rubbed me the wrong way was when she made a comment about our family being too close and said, "It's nice that you all get along, but it's a little much. I don't know how you handle it." When Jake told me she'd be joining us on the trip, I was uncomfortable but didn't know how to handle it. Mark told me I should just go with the flow and that it would be fine. But I wasn't convinced. I thought about how she didn't really mesh with the family, and I started feeling anxious about what the vacation would be like. This trip has always been something special for our family, a chance to bond and relax without the stresses of daily life, and I didn't want her to cause drama or ruin the vibe. I talked to Mark about my concerns, and he was understanding, but he also said I should give Lauren a chance. I agreed to try to be civil, but as time went on, my gut feelings about her only grew stronger. I didn't want to ruin the trip for everyone else, so I decided to talk to Jake directly. I told him that I didn't feel comfortable with Lauren coming on the family vacation because of the way she had acted in the past. I didn't go into a lot of detail, but I explained that I was worried she wouldn't mesh well with the family dynamic, and I didn't want her to feel out of place or make the atmosphere uncomfortable. I also said that it wasn't just about her. My main concern was how it would impact the overall vibe of the trip. Jake got upset when I brought it up. He told me I was being dramatic and that I needed to stop acting like the family vacation was a sacred event that couldn't be disrupted by new people. He also accused me of trying to control who could and couldn't be a part of our family. He said it was unfair to single out Lauren and that I was being unnecessarily harsh toward her when I hadn't even given her a real chance. He even implied that I was trying to keep him from being happy just because I didn't like her. I tried to explain that it wasn't about controlling his life or keeping him from being happy. I just want to make sure that the trip went smoothly and that the whole family enjoyed it, but Jake wasn't having it. He said he didn't want to hear about it anymore and that he and Lauren were definitely coming. I told him that if that was the case, I wasn't sure I would be comfortable going on the trip myself. That was when things really escalated. Mark was caught in the middle, and he tried to calm both of us down, but it only made me feel like he wasn't taking my side. He said I was being too rigid and that I should just accept that Jake had his own life now and that it wasn't my place to dictate who he could bring into the family. I ended up saying that if Lauren came, I wasn't going. I told him I wasn't going to spend an entire week with someone I wasn't comfortable with, especially someone who had shown such a lack of interest in our family. The response from both Jake and Mark was not what I expected. Jake accused me of being selfish and unreasonable, and Mark said I was being overly dramatic about the whole thing. The rest of the family found out, and now there's a huge divide. My parents are on my side. They agree that it's important to maintain the peace during family vacations and that new relationships should be handled with more care, but they also don't want me to miss out on the trip. Some of Mark's relatives have sided with him, saying that I need to let go and accept that Jake is an adult who can make his own decisions. Now it's a huge mess. Jake and I aren't speaking, and Mark is upset with me for causing this drama. I'm getting a lot of pressure from family members to just drop it and let Jake bring Lauren, but I can't shake the feeling that this is more than just a new girlfriend situation. I'm not comfortable with how things have gone, and I don't want to force myself into a situation where I'll feel like I'm walking on eggshells the entire time. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother-in-law bring his girlfriend to our family vacation after their history. I feel like I'm being reasonable by wanting to keep the peace, but everyone seems to think I'm overreacting. AITA for not letting my friend bring her new boyfriend to my birthday party. I, 29F, have a close-knit group of friends that I've known since college. We've been through a lot together, moved across states, navigated job changes, and supported each other through the good and bad. I'd say we're a tight group, and we respect each other's boundaries, for the most part. I'm someone who values a small, intimate atmosphere for my birthday celebrations. I'm not into big parties or making a spectacle out of it. I prefer dinner at a small restaurant, good food, and quality time with people I'm comfortable with. This year, I decided to do something a little special for my birthday, a nice dinner at a local restaurant with just my closest friends. I made a reservation for 8 people. The people I invited were those I knew would respect the environment I wanted to create, calm, low-key, and fun. One of my friends, Natalie, 30F, has been dating someone for about a month, and she's been really excited about it. I'm happy for her, of course, but she hasn't been able to stop talking about this guy, Ben, 32M. Every time we hang out, she goes on and on about how perfect he is, how they've been on the most romantic dates, and how he's the one. It's been a little much for me, to be honest, especially because she hasn't given us much time to get to know him. I'm not saying he's a bad guy or anything, but I prefer to meet people gradually, rather than being hit with a sudden "here's my boyfriend" surprise. A week before my birthday, Natalie texted me and asked if she could bring Ben along to the party. I was a bit taken aback. I had already finalized the guest list, and I didn't want it turning into a larger gathering. I've always been the kind of person who likes keeping things small and manageable, and I knew that adding someone I didn't know well would change the vibe of the evening. I politely told Natalie that I had already planned the seating arrangements and that I was hoping for a smaller group to celebrate with. I explained that it wasn't about Ben, but rather about keeping the event as intimate as possible. She wasn't happy with that response. She texted me back saying, "Come on, it's just one extra person, and I really want him to meet my friends. You know how important he is to me." I could tell she was pushing, but I stuck to my guns and reiterated that I had already made the plans and felt it would be best if it stayed as it was. I told her that I was really looking forward to spending the evening with the people I had invited, and I wasn't comfortable making any last-minute changes. The conversation seemed to end there, but I wasn't expecting what happened next. Natalie didn't just stop asking. She started to give me the silent treatment. For the next couple of days, she barely responded to my texts, and when we did talk, it was short and strained. She would occasionally bring up how awkward it was that I was turning down her request, and how she couldn't understand why I was being so stubborn. I tried to explain myself again, telling her that it wasn't about not wanting to meet Ben or not wanting her to have a good time. It was just that I didn't want to make my birthday about something that wasn't part of the original plan. I told her I was sure she could introduce Ben to everyone at another time when the atmosphere was more relaxed. On the day of my birthday, I arrived at the restaurant early to ensure everything was set up. As people started to arrive, everything was going well, and I was excited for the evening. But then, just as I was chatting with a few people, Natalie and Ben walked in. My stomach dropped. She had brought him anyway, despite everything I had said. I greeted them politely, but I'll admit I was upset. I tried to keep a smile on my face and made small talk with Ben, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Natalie had completely disregarded my wishes. It wasn't just about her bringing him. She had openly ignored my request and walked in like everything was fine. The whole situation felt a little disrespectful, especially since I'd been clear about what I wanted for my birthday. We sat down for dinner, and the mood felt off. I could tell that Natalie was expecting me to be all over Ben and to make him feel welcome, but I was still processing how she'd ignored my boundaries. I didn't want to make a scene or ruin the night, so I did my best to engage with Ben and include him in the conversation, but I wasn't genuinely feeling it. The rest of the night, things didn't get much better. I felt like the dynamic had shifted. It was as if the evening was now more about Ben than me. I kept thinking that Natalie had made it about her and her new boyfriend instead of respecting the simple request I had made. I kept trying to focus on the good conversation and the fact that my friends were there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been disrespected. Finally, after dinner, I excused myself to the restroom to get a breather. When I came back, I found that Natalie was talking to the group of friends about how awkward it had been that I hadn't made Ben feel more welcome. She was openly discussing her disappointment that I hadn't taken more initiative in involving him in the conversation. I couldn't believe it. Not only did she bring him without asking, but she was now making it my fault that things weren't going the way she expected. I didn't let slide. When I sat down, I told her in front of everyone that I didn't appreciate her disregarding my request and bringing Ben anyway. I told her that it wasn't about him, but about how she hadn't respected my wishes for a small, intimate evening. I also told her that it was unfair for her to criticize me in front of our friends when she had already made the situation uncomfortable by ignoring the boundaries I'd set. The rest of the night was awkward. Natalie was quiet, and the rest of the group seemed uncomfortable, unsure of how to navigate the tension. When the evening ended, I thanked everyone for coming and said my goodbyes. As I was leaving, Natalie pulled me aside and told me that I had overreacted. She said I was being selfish and that I should have just let her bring Ben. She said that it was important for her to share her happiness with her friends and that I was making it about myself. I told her that I was disappointed that she hadn't respected my wishes and that it felt like she wasn't valuing my friendship. We left it at that, and I haven't spoken to her much since. Now, I'm starting to second-guess myself. Did I overreact? AITA for not letting my friend bring her new boyfriend to my birthday party? I feel like I was clear about my intentions, but the fallout from the situation has left me questioning if I was being too rigid. AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she sold her dog without telling me. I, 30F, have a younger sister, Rachel, 26F, who I've always been really close with. Growing up, we shared everything, and although we have had our differences over the years, we've always had each other's backs. Rachel has been living in a different state for the past 2 years due to work, but we still talk often and try to visit each other when we can. Recently, Rachel lost her job due to downsizing, and she reached out to me, asking if she could stay with me while she looks for new work. I'm not rich by any means, but I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I've always been open to helping family when they need it. I knew it would be a bit of an adjustment, but I agreed without hesitation. We were both excited about spending time together, and I was looking forward to having her around, even if it meant a little less personal space. Rachel arrived a few days ago, and everything seemed to be going smoothly at first. We caught up, laughed. It was nice to have her here again. However, things took a turn when I asked her about her dog, Daisy. Rachel had always been a huge animal lover, and Daisy, a golden retriever, had been her companion for over 4 years. She had even talked about how Daisy was her baby, and they did everything together. I hadn't heard anything about Daisy lately, and when I asked Rachel where she was, she gave me a strange look before saying, "Oh, I gave her away." I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her what she meant by "gave her away," and she casually explained that she'd sold Daisy to a family that was looking for a dog. Apparently, they lived in a bigger house with a yard, and Rachel thought Daisy would have a better life there. I was speechless. Rachel didn't even seem to think it was a big deal. I tried to process what she said, but I couldn't. I asked her why she didn't tell me about it sooner, especially since Daisy had been a big part of her life for so long. Rachel said she didn't think it was necessary to talk about it, and that she had been feeling overwhelmed with her job situation and moving around. She went on to say that the decision had been made quickly, and she felt good about it because she knew the family would take care of Daisy. I didn't know how to react. I felt hurt that Rachel didn't give me a heads up or ask for advice before making such a big decision. I've been around dogs my whole life, and I understand how important they can be to people. So to me, rehoming a dog without consulting anyone, especially family, felt like a betrayal. I had watched Rachel struggle with a lot of things in her life, but her bond with Daisy was always something she was proud of. The fact that she sold her without any real emotional consideration seemed cold to me. Over the next couple of days, I kept thinking about it and trying to make sense of Rachel's decision. I could see that she wasn't particularly upset about it. In fact, she seemed relieved, which just added to my confusion. How could she be so nonchalant about giving up something that had been such an important part of her life for years? I decided to bring it up again. I told Rachel that I felt uncomfortable with what she had done and that I didn't think it was something she should have kept from me. I told her that I didn't understand why she didn't at least try to find a solution where Daisy could stay with her, even temporarily. Rachel's response was to get defensive. She said that it wasn't my place to tell her how to handle her life or her decisions, and that I was overreacting. She said she did what she thought was best for Daisy, and that was all that mattered. She even went as far as saying that I was acting like Daisy was more important than her. At that point, I was starting to get really frustrated. I explained that it wasn't about Daisy being more important than her, but about the lack of communication and respect. I reminded Rachel that we were family, and we should be able to talk openly about decisions like that, especially when they involve something as big as rehoming a pet. I also mentioned that I felt hurt because, as her sister, I would have been more than happy to take care of Daisy temporarily if Rachel couldn't handle her. I didn't expect Rachel to just give her away without considering how it would affect the people around her. Rachel didn't take this well. She told me that I was being too judgmental and that I was treating her like a child. She accused me of trying to guilt trip her and said that I was just upset because I hadn't been there for her in the same way she had been there for me in the past. She also pointed out that I had never been that crazy about animals in the first place, so I shouldn't be so worked up about it. This comment really stung. I felt like she was completely disregarding my feelings and, in a way, trying to turn the situation around on me. I know I'm not as emotional about animals as she is, but that doesn't mean I don't understand the attachment people can have to their pets. The fact that Rachel seemed so indifferent to my hurt feelings made me feel like she didn't respect me or my opinions. As the days went on, I started to feel more and more uncomfortable with her staying at my place. I didn't know how to shake off the feeling of betrayal and confusion, and it was starting to affect the atmosphere in the apartment. I began to feel like I was walking on eggshells, constantly questioning whether or not I was overreacting. I wanted to be supportive of Rachel, especially since she was going through a tough time with her job, but her lack of empathy and the way she handled the whole dog situation made it hard for me to stay calm and collected. I decided to talk to my partner, Josh 35M, about it. He agreed that Rachel's actions were strange, and he could tell I was upset. He suggested that I have a conversation with Rachel about her staying with us and maybe set some boundaries. It was clear that our living situation wasn't going to work unless I addressed this issue head on. So, after a long internal struggle, I decided to have a serious conversation with Rachel. I told her that while I was happy to help her out with a place to stay, I couldn't continue to host her while feeling so hurt and disrespected. I explained that I needed her to be more considerate of my feelings, especially since I had always been there for her in the past. I also told her that I wasn't sure I could continue to support her staying with me if she wasn't going to take responsibility for her actions and acknowledge how much her decision had impacted me. Rachel didn't take this well either. She told me that I was being unfair and that she hadn't asked me to be her emotional support system. She said I should stop holding on to things and that she would just find another place to stay if I couldn't be more understanding. At this point, I was really torn. I wanted to help Rachel, but I also didn't want to continue enabling her behavior. I couldn't get past how hurtful it felt that she didn't seem to care about my feelings. I'm at a point where I'm wondering if I'm being too hard on her or if I'm justified in feeling so betrayed. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she sold her dog without telling me. I want to be there for her, but I don't know if I can get past this. AITA for refusing to let my best friend stay at my house after she canceled on me multiple times and didn't apologize. I, 27F, have been friends with Sarah, 28F, since college. We've been through a lot together, moving to different cities, starting new jobs, relationships, you name it. We've always been there for each other, and I consider her one of my closest friends. However, recently, things have gotten a bit strained, and I'm starting to wonder if I've been too lenient with her behavior. Sarah has always been a little flaky when it comes to plans. She's one of those people who makes a lot of promises, but when the time comes, she often backs out or reschedules at the last minute. I've always let it slide, understanding that life gets in the way sometimes. We all have busy lives, and I don't mind being understanding when things don't go as planned. But over the past year, I've started to notice a pattern that's bothering me. A few months ago, Sarah asked if she could stay at my place for a weekend. She had some personal stuff going on, and I could tell she was feeling overwhelmed. She said she wanted to get away and have some time to relax, and I offered to let her crash in my apartment. I'm a pretty laid-back person. I didn't mind at all. In fact, I was happy to help her out. I cleared my schedule for the weekend and even planned some fun activities for us to do, knowing that she could use a break. But the weekend before she was supposed to come, she texted me saying she couldn't make it. She claimed that work had gotten crazy and she needed to stay home and catch up on some things. I totally understood and told her it was fine. Life happens, and I wasn't upset. We rescheduled for the next weekend. Fast forward to the following weekend, and once again, she canceled. This time, she said she was too tired and needed some alone time. I was a little disappointed, but told her it was no big deal. I told myself maybe she really needed to recharge, and I'd try again next month. But then it happened again and again and again. Each time, she would cancel last minute with some excuse. Work, being too busy, needing to spend time with her boyfriend, or feeling sick. Every time she canceled, I was understanding, but as the months passed, I started to feel like I was being taken for granted. It felt like I was always on the back burner whenever something better came up for her. The final straw came a few weeks ago. Sarah reached out to me and asked if she could come stay at my place again. She said she really needed a break and wanted to just hang out like old times. At this point, I was hesitant but agreed. I told her I would be happy to host her, but I needed her to confirm by a certain date so I could make sure I was available. She promised she would, and we set the date. Well, the day before she was supposed to arrive, I still hadn't heard from her. I texted her and reminded her to confirm the details. She texted back, saying she was feeling overwhelmed and wasn't sure she could make it. I was frustrated, but tried to stay calm. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to cancel again. She said, "I'm really sorry, but I don't think I'll be able to make it. Maybe next time." At this point, I snapped. I sent her a message saying, "You've canceled on me every time we've planned something for the past several months. I've been more than understanding, but this is getting ridiculous. I don't feel like you actually care about spending time with me. It's always excuses. I'm not going to keep rearranging my life for you just to be let down again." She immediately replied, saying that I was being too sensitive and that I should understand that life happens. She apologized, but the apology felt empty. I was still so angry. I felt like I had given her enough chances, and she had repeatedly taken advantage of my kindness. It was like she didn't even care about our friendship anymore. I didn't respond to her right away. I needed time to cool off, but in my head, I was still fuming. Over the next few days, I thought about it a lot. I realized that every time I'd open my door to her, she had taken it for granted, and each time she canceled, it hurt a little more. I was tired of being a backup plan for someone who didn't respect my time or feelings. A few days later, I decided I was done being passive. I sent Sarah a text that read, "I've been thinking about our friendship, and I'm really hurt by how things have been going. You've canceled on me so many times without any real consideration for how it makes me feel. I'm not going to keep letting this happen. I need a break from this friendship. I'm sorry, but I can't keep hosting you or making plans if this continues." She replied quickly, and this time, she was furious. She accused me of being selfish and said I was overreacting. She said I was holding a grudge over something so trivial and that I was just mad because she had a boyfriend now and didn't have as much time for me. She told me I was being dramatic and that I was acting like I was the only person in her life. I was hurt by her response, but I stood firm in my decision. I told her that it wasn't just about her boyfriend, it was about her repeatedly flaking out on plans, not respecting my time, and not valuing our friendship the way I had been trying to. I told her that I needed space, and I couldn't continue to make excuses for her behavior. It's been 2 weeks since that conversation, and I haven't heard from her since. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Part of me feels like I did the right thing, standing up for myself and not allowing myself to be treated like a doormat. But another part of me wonders if I overreacted. Maybe I should have been more patient or understanding. Maybe I should have let it go and let her work through whatever she was dealing with. But in the end, I just couldn't keep doing it. I've been talking to some of my other friends about the situation, and while they understand why I'm upset, they've told me that I might have taken it too far by cutting her off entirely. I'm really conflicted now. AITA for refusing to let Sarah stay at my house after she canceled on me so many times without apologizing or acknowledging how it made me feel. AITA for calling out my best friend for not respecting my boundaries when it comes to my personal space. I, 30F, have a best friend, Sarah, 30F, who I've known since college. We've been through a lot together, traveled, lived together for a few years after graduation, and just generally supported each other through some of the most significant events in our lives. We've always been really close, but recently, things have been strained between us, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm in the wrong for what I did. I've always valued my personal space and independence. I'm not someone who likes to have people around all the time, and I'm very specific about my boundaries when it comes to sharing space with others. I've been living on my own for the last 2 years, and it's been really important for me to maintain my routine and feel like I have control over my environment. I'm also someone who enjoys my alone time, whether that means binge watching a show, reading, or just having quiet time to recharge. Sarah, on the other hand, is much more extroverted. She loves having people around, and she's one of those people who thrives when she's in social environments. She's the type of person who will pop over to a friend's house without much notice, and she doesn't always take the time to ask if the other person is okay with it. Over the years, I've gotten used to her tendency to be spontaneous, but I've always tried to set some boundaries with her, especially when it comes to my home and my space. About 3 months ago, Sarah lost her job unexpectedly. It was a tough blow for her, and I immediately offered my support. I knew she was feeling down about it and didn't want her to be alone, so I invited her to hang out at my place when she needed some distraction or company. However, after a few weeks, she started coming over more and more, sometimes multiple times a week. She would drop by without letting me know, sometimes staying for hours. At first, I didn't mind because I understood that she was going through a hard time. I knew she needed support, and I wanted to be there for her. But it started to get to a point where it felt like Sarah was taking advantage of my hospitality. I would come home after a long day at work, only to find her sitting on my couch watching TV, sometimes with a bottle of wine in hand. She'd often just let herself in if I didn't answer the door, which made me feel uncomfortable. I've always prided myself on keeping my home as my sanctuary, a place where I can unwind and be alone, and this sudden influx of visits started to feel like an invasion of my privacy. It wasn't just that she was coming over uninvited, but Sarah would also show up at odd times, like late in the evening, even after I'd made it clear that I needed some downtime. I casually mentioned that I needed to recharge and that I couldn't host her every time she wanted to hang out, but she'd brush it off with a laugh, saying, "You're fine. You can't be alone all the time." I started to feel like my boundaries were being ignored, and it made me resentful. I felt like she wasn't respecting my need for space, which is something I'd been clear about for years. A few weeks ago, I had had enough. Sarah had come over again, uninvited, and this time, she didn't even give me a heads up. I had just gotten home from work, and I was exhausted. I had plans to spend the evening relaxing and catching up on a show I'd been watching, but Sarah was sitting on my couch, scrolling through her phone. When I asked her when she had arrived, she casually said, "Oh, I just let myself in. You didn't answer the door, and I figured you wouldn't mind." At that moment, I felt like I had reached my breaking point. I tried to keep my calm, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told Sarah that I needed her to respect my boundaries, that I valued my alone time, and that I wasn't okay with her showing up without asking first. I explained that I was grateful to be there for her while she was going through a tough time, but I needed her to understand that I needed my space too. I said that it wasn't personal, but it had become a pattern, and it was starting to affect my mental health. Sarah's reaction was not what I expected. She got defensive and told me that I was being selfish and that I should be grateful that she wanted to spend time with me. She said I was overreacting and that I didn't know how to let people in anymore. She accused me of being too independent and said that she was just trying to support me in my time of need. She also said, "If you need your space that much, then maybe you should have lived alone and not have invited me to hang out in the first place." Her words stung, but I held firm. I told her that I wasn't rejecting her. I was rejecting the way she was disregarding my boundaries. I told her that I was still there for her, but that she needed to respect my need for space. I explained that I wanted to help her, but I couldn't do that if she kept imposing on my personal time and space. Since that conversation, Sarah hasn't come over as much, but the tension between us has been palpable. She's been distant, and I've heard from a mutual friend that she's been telling people that I'm being too rigid and selfish for not letting her into my life more. A few days ago, she even texted me saying, "I guess I'll just figure things out on my own since you're too busy with your own life to care about me." That text hit me hard, and I've been second-guessing myself ever since. Now, I'm left wondering if I overreacted. Was I too harsh in setting boundaries with her? Should I have been more understanding and allowed her to lean on me more during this tough time? I know I wasn't rude, but I can't help but feel guilty about how things turned out. I do care about Sarah, and I want to be there for her, but I also need to make sure my own needs are being met. So, AITA for calling out my best friend for not respecting my boundaries when it comes to my personal space. I feel like I was clear and reasonable, but now I'm wondering if I should have handled things differently. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.